Welcome to In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson. Join Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible, both from Milligan College, as they bring you their thoughts and knowledge of the study of the Sunday School lesson for the day. Now, here is Dr. Gwaltney.
Good morning. Dr. Lee Magnus and I welcome you to our continuing discussion on the theme of faith in the gospel stories. We're in the Gospel of Luke, and we continue there this morning. And we have a really interesting story, Lee, this morning to discuss.
This is a fascinating one. It certainly is, about the demon-possessed man.
Yes, and pigs.
And we even get some pigs in here, yes. I grew up on a farm, and pigs were my least favorite animal on the
Your
farm.
least favorite?
Yes.
Well,
so I've never mourned over the destruction of the pigs.
Well, with a name like Gwaltney, I got to be a lover of pigs.
You do, that's true. The interesting thing about this story is that it's preceded by a very important event that helps prepare us
in Luke's,
for the experience.
The way
in Luke's Gospel,
Luke,
yeah.
Yes.
First of all, we might remember that Luke is especially attentive to any story where Jesus is reaching out to lowly people, to outcasts, to the marginalized members of their society, and of course to the lost.
Yes.
And this story definitely fits that pattern, even though it also appears in Matthew and Mark.
Right. But Luke really wants to home in on the distressed people that he finds around him, and that Jewish people would find around them.
And this demon-possessed man fits the category. Now, Jesus has been ministering over in the region of Galilee on the west side of the Sea of Galilee.
Yes.
But the immediately preceding story describes a journey that they took by boat.
Yes.
From Capernaum over to the east side.
Right.
Now, the Sea of Galilee is not all that big.
13 miles long and 8 miles wide at its widest. And in its deepest point is about 140 feet deep. Yeah. And the deepest point is really kind of like on the east side of the sea. So, and there are, 14, 15 different towns, villages surrounding it. Now, on the west side, they seem to be Jewish dominated.
Mainly Jewish, although there are a couple of mainly Gentile settled cities, like Sepphoris.
Well, that's not on the sea, though.
Not right on the sea, but Tiberias was mainly populated by Gentiles.
Yes, and it's interesting, we have no record in the Gospels that Jesus ever entered Tiberias. Right. He must have.
Well, but Jews were not very comfortable in Sepphoris, in Tiberias, because it was dedicated to the Roman emperor.
Well, now on the east side of the sea, we're definitely in Gentile territory, almost no Jewish presence there.
Way back in the time of Alexander the Great, almost 400 years before these events, lots of Gentiles, Greeks, had settled in that area.
Yes.
And it was a loose confederation of towns collectively called Decapolis.
Decapolis, which means
the 10 cities.
10 cities.
Yeah. And so this is predominantly Gentile territory.
Now, the place that is nearest the one of the Decapolis, the 10 cities, that is nearest the sea on the east side was a city called Hippus, and we have the ruins preserved there that you can go and see, and they're definitely Greek, Roman. Yeah. Greco-Roman, and you can tell it is not a Jewish city. And so that it is just 3 miles from that city where the events take place today.
On the east
I've
side.
been to the place. It is named now Kursi, Kursi, and it was just a freak of good luck that when the Israelis started to build a road, a new road into the Golan Heights, to the east that they ran across and unearthed some ruins of a Byzantine church, which probably goes back to somewhere in the neighborhood of the late 300s or the early 400s. It is the largest Byzantine structure that's area that has been found in Israel, and they've turned it into a park, and you can go there, and the archaeologists have unearthed it, and it's on display. That is probably the place where this event took place. And as I said, it's right on the edge of the sea, and there's a nice path for the pigs to take to get down into the sea. It's 3 miles from Hippus.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, the story that precedes this is their journey across the Sea of Galilee from the west side, the Jewish side, over to the east side, the Gentile side. And it was one of those storms at sea stories. And we know the story very well. What we'd like to point out to our viewers is that story ends with Jesus asking this question, where is your faith? Because he saw their fear, even fear after Jesus had stilled the storm.
Now, Jesus was in the boat with them, and we have, by archaeology and good luck, we have a ship, a boat, let's call it a boat. It's 27 feet long and about 7 feet and a half across the widest part, and it could accommodate about 12, 13 people. It could run under wind power with one sail, or it could be rowed with oars.
Yeah.
Well, we know about it. I mean, we have it. And if you go to Israel, be sure to look it up. It's on the west. It's on the west side of the sea.
Well, the interesting thing is that Jesus has just stilled a storm at sea and demonstrated his power over the natural elements.
And he was in the boat with them.
Right.
All the time.
Right. And now...
And they got scared. And so he upbraids them, where's your faith?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. Now they're about to land in the midst of a storm of a different kind. A storm of the human soul. And so what we're about to see is how Jesus exerts his influence and power over another kind of storm.
And really in the synoptic gospels, the parallel gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you have miracles in 4 different categories. Jesus controls the demons, he controls the natural storms, he controls disease and bodily illness, and he even is able to control death.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have now 2 of the 4 in this picture that you've painted.
Yeah. Well, let me read the story of the Gerasene demoniac. We'll start in Luke chapter 8, verse 26. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed, and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured.
The printed text ends before the story ends.
Right.
So may I read the rest of the story?
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
Beginning in verse 37, taking up. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might go with Jesus, but he sent him away. Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. And that's the end of the rest of the story.
Well, and it's really very important that you added that, because it's in those verses that are not printed in our text
we get the
that
faith.
we see the faith at work.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known. The man was healed, but there's no evidence of faith. But here, with his testimony about Jesus, we see evidence of that faith.
Now, I think this is so remarkable because of one thing that we might have lost sight of. This man is not a Jew. Right. I think every evidence points to that. Even the way in which God is referred to in verse 28.
The Most High God.
The Most High God. Now, Jewish people would use that terminology, but it is especially true of Gentile populations of that part of the world. Yeah. Baal Shamin in Aramaic means Lord of the heavens.
And another thing, of course, is the presence of the pigs. That's another evidence that we're in Gentile territory. Plus, we know that the east side of the sea was populated almost entirely by Gentiles.
Yes.
This is a fascinating story, and we see here lots of other evidences of power. In the preceding story, the storm at sea, we saw the power of the natural world at work, a terrifying storm at sea.
And Jesus is supreme over that power.
Right. In this story, we get hints of other kinds of power. For instance, there's the physical power of this man who has to be chained.
And he breaks the chains.
And he breaks the chains. So here's a person of immense physical strength. We see spiritual power or demonic power at work in this story.
Right.
The word possessed implies power over somebody else.
And the demon himself refers to himself with a Roman name, Legion.
Right. Legion. So there's the suggestion of military and political power.
Yes.
So we have all of these evidences of power, and when you put these two stories together, we get a full picture of the powers that we face in our lives.
And this is demonic power, destructive power, which we seem to be seeing in a lot of people around us, even in our own time.
Right.
Self-destructive.
Self-destructive, yes. We don't in this account in Luke, we don't get the mention of him cutting himself, but in the other Gospels there is the mention of that.
The story is in Matthew and in Mark too.
Yes, and he's not only destructive, he's self-destructive, as you say. So one of the great themes of this story, with its companion storm at sea story, is that Jesus is powerful, has authority over the natural elements, over the demonic world, over even greater than physical strength, and we have this political military angle thrown in with the word legion.
Right.
Maybe we should mention what a legion is.
Well, we talk about divisions and battalions and so forth. They talked about legions and centuries.
Right.
A century is
about 100.
At its maximum.
Right.
Usually less than that.
Yeah.
But
and a legion was a little less than 6,000 troops.
Yeah. I think 6,000 was considered to be the maximum.
The full, right.
Yeah.
So when he says his name is Legion, he means very much possessed.
And by the way, between the century and the legion there is the cohort.
Cohort, right.
And we hear all three of these terms in the New Testament itself, describing the Roman army.
Yeah. Now this man is definitely a reject. He's definitely been pushed out to the fringes of society.
Well, if it is true that he is here in the vicinity of what is today called Kursi, then he's 3 miles out of town. So yeah, he's and somehow or another he is living among the graves.
Yeah, they've driven him out. Many of the graves in that part of the world were caves in the rocks.
Yes.
So he could have gone there just to find shelter.
Well, there are two kinds of graves in those days. There were the cave-type graves, which burrow back into a hillside, and then there are shaft graves, in which you have a vertical or nearly vertical shaft, and at the bottom you have a room. So I don't know what they have discovered in terms of ancient graves at this particular site, but anyway, you have both types being used simultaneously in the New Testament era.
Yeah. I want to talk about fear a little bit, because we've been talking about fear in relationship to faith in some of our previous lessons. And
would you say they're opposites of one another?
No, I wouldn't say they're opposites. They can be opposites, but I think it's possible for a certain kind of fear, of reverential awe, to be a companion of faith. They're not necessarily opposites.
That's right, but the fear that's expressed here by the disciples in the boat seems to be the opposite of faith.
It can be a barrier there to faith.
And so it is with these people where the pigs ran away. I don't think they were marveling in the power of God.
No, right, that's true.
So there are two kinds of fear.
There are, and what's interesting is that fear happens in two different places in each of the stories. In the story of the crossing of the sea, they were afraid of the storm when it blew up, as storms had a way of doing in the Galilee, blowing up very quickly. They were afraid of the storm. And then after Jesus stilled the storm, it says they were afraid.
And there they were in awe.
Well, yes.
At what Jesus had done.
But Jesus still said, where is your faith? It was the question. Now, in this story, they're clearly afraid of the demon-possessed man. Because they had tried to chain him out away from the town, so he didn't terrorize them. But then, as you read in the addendum to our printed text, even after they came out and found the man sitting clothed and in his right mind, it says they were afraid again. And begged Jesus
probably a slightly different kind of fear.
Slightly different kind of fear. But in each case, they confront some force of nature or the human...
Or individual.
Which is a fear that they can't control. And I think that's what makes us afraid, isn't it?
Out of control.
If it's something that we can't control. We can't control storms. There's nothing we can do to control storms. There's nothing we can do to control certain behaviors that just are out of control and self-destructive.
Do you remember, let me illustrate that. You remember a few years back when there was a big series of tornadoes that came through not only our area right here, but also south of us and up in southwestern Virginia. And we knew that there were tornadoes on the ground and they were coming, and you sit there and wondering, is it going to hit here? Is it going to blow my house down? Is it going to kill me and my family? And that is one of the most recent times of fear in my own life.
You can't control the power of it. You can't abate the power at all. You can't control the path. You can't control the duration. It's just uncontrolled.
But I was in the path of another tornado at Christmas. down in Birmingham.
Okay.
But I wasn't afraid there
Oh.
as much as I was at home here, because we were in a basement.
Oh, good.
Which had been fitted out to deal with a tornado.
You didn't hide in the bathtub, did you?
No.
Just in the basement?
No, we were in the basement.
Oh, good.
And it was a whole bunch of us.
Okay.
And a couple of dogs,
Good.
too. So.
Well, that's so interesting. The second fear in each of these stories comes when people confront Jesus, because Jesus
Yes.
has a power that's even greater than the power they originally feared.
Yes.
And there's something kind of appropriate to that.
Yes.
And I think
Certainly.
we talked about that a little bit when we discussed the end of the Gospel of Mark, where the women were afraid when they saw the empty tomb. And I can kind of defend them on that, because they had now confronted a power over death
Yes.
that was even stronger than the power of death itself.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Now, but this whole story does produce faith, an expression of faith, even though the word is not used. Now, I don't believe either in verbal form or noun or adjectival form that faith, the term, ever shows up in the story.
Right.
But when you look at the very end, where the man wants to become a follower of Jesus, he wants to go with Jesus, and he offers, to become his followers. That's an expression of faith.
Yes, it is.
And Jesus says no.
And
then he says, you stay here and tell everybody what God has done for you.
And he goes away proclaiming throughout the city where he had once been driven out of how much Jesus had done for him.
For how much Jesus had done for him.
So he's come to faith, and we see two evidences of it: his desire to follow and his testimony.
Yes.
Now, both of those things are opposites of the way Jesus normally interacted with people after he had done a healing miracle, or an exorcism.
Explain that.
Yeah, normally, and when I say normally, I mean in Jesus' interaction with Jewish people, which is where most of his interaction was, if someone wanted to follow Jesus, he welcomed them. That was a wonderful thing, to follow Jesus. That's what it means to be a disciple. And if they were inclined to start talking about their healing or exorcism, Jesus usually told them not to talk about it.
Yeah, let's not cause a big hullabaloo here.
And I think the reason for that, which is what some scholars call that the messianic secret. Don't talk about me being the Messiah.
Especially strong in Mark.
It's especially strong in Mark.
They say.
Yes. And I think the point of that is that Jewish people had built up a certain expectation of the coming Messiah. And it was pretty much tied into the exertion of military and political power.
Yes.
And so when Jesus comes doing miracles, he doesn't want them to associate his messianic identity just with his ability to do miracles.
Right.
And so he says, let's not talk about that, but great, come follow me. Now this guy is a Gentile.
Yes.
And the people he can communicate with are Gentiles who don't have this expectation of a coming Messiah.
And an armed rebellion against Rome. In fact, they would be on the Roman side of every issue.
They certainly would.
Yes.
So Jesus is not prepared. It would not have worked to have a Gentile following him day by day as he ministered in Jewish territory.
Right.
By the same token, he's happy for him to testify to the power of Jesus among his Gentile
neighbors. This
neighbors.
also is a wonderful addition to Luke's point of Jesus developing relationships outside of the normal Jewish relationships. And here he is. He's got a spokesman in a thoroughly Gentile city.
Yeah.
And it's not a town, it's a city.
Right. And we've seen, you're right, this is another in an important list. Jesus has interacted with Samaritans, Jesus has interacted with women
Yes.
in what was considered kind of an inappropriate public way.
Yes.
He interacted with that centurion, that Roman centurion,
Yes.
whose slave he healed. And now he's interacting personally with a Gentile man over in the Decapolis.
And elsewhere, a story is told of his even migrating to outside of Jewish territory, where Peter makes the great confession,
Right.
Caesarea Philippi.
There's the Syrophoenician woman.
And that was where I was headed next.
Okay, yes.
To the Mediterranean Sea this time.
Yeah. So Luke emphasizes that. The other Gospels mention it, but Luke emphasizes Jesus' willingness to reach outside of traditional Jewish
Yes.
connections.
And of course, Luke, when he is writing this Gospel, is living in a very large world as a Christian leader, and a friend and close associate of the Apostle Paul, and they are taking the gospel to the entire eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea, and the church probably has more, or at least a big part, of non-Jewish members.
So they'd be fascinated with the way Jesus himself, a Jew, reached out to these other people.
So the Gospel of Luke is making the point that when we preach the gospel to Gentiles, we're only following in the track that Jesus laid out for us.
Right.
And he's telling that story in that way in the Gospel of Luke, I think.
Let me mention one other little theme here, and that is the theme of identity. When Jesus confronts this man who is clearly out of his mind and out of control of his body as a result of his demon possession, the question he asks in verse 30 is, "What is your name?" And I think Jesus is trying to cut through all of this aberrant behavior and say, let's talk about who are you really?
And name means identity.
Identity, personhood.
Yes.
And now,
Who
of course,
are you?
the demons respond. We are legion, and they, not the man, they beg to be sent into the pigs and all of that. But Jesus is trying to cut through, and once he has healed this man, which he does, we see him, and he has come to himself. He is his true identity once again. He's not running around crazy. He's sitting.
With multiple personalities.
Right. He's not naked. He's dressed, and he's not out
chained.
of. He's not.
Chained.
He's not out of his mind. He's in his right mind.
Yes.
So, it suggests to me that when Jesus encounters us, he's trying to get us to realize who we really are meant to be by virtue of being the children of God. And his impact on our lives is to restore us to that true identity, the way we are meant to be.
Well, we have seen many folks that have multiple personalities and how destructive this can be. And so Jesus, once again, is the healer, and he does bring us to our true identity when we are under his hand.
And brings us to faith.
And brings us to faith, as he did with this poor soul.
Yeah.
We're so glad that we could talk with you about this very, very meaningful story in the life of Christ. And we hope that you profited from our discussion. Next week, we'll continue in the Gospel of Luke with another story about faith. And we look for you then. God bless you.
This has been In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson with Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible from Milligan College, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible of Milligan College. Join us again next week for another lesson from the International Bible School lesson text. This has been a production of the First Christian Church Television Ministries.